Hey, welcome to another episode on the People Productivity Channel, where you are the product and a better you is the solution. Today, I have on a very special guest, Donna Brighton. Donna focuses on helping leaders realize their potential and find their unique leadership style. She helps organizations grow, and Donna has been doing this successfully since 2004. I don't know if you realize most businesses really close down after 3 years, 16 years. That's an accomplishment. That means Donna's doing a lot of things very right and adding a lot of value to different people and companies. So Donna's going to share a lot of interesting things about leadership. I think you should stay tuned. And without further ado, Donna, could you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thanks for that
Yeah.
warm welcome, Frank. As you said, I'm Donna Brighton, and my passion for leadership has extended for quite some time because, and I'm sure all of you can identify with this, that leaders can make your life magnificent or miserable. And we've all worked with leaders of both kinds. And my goal is how can we help leaders help help them be more magnificent and create magnificence for the people in their organization. So that's been my passion since I
I love it.
studied leadership.
Every leader can do that. No question.
Yes,
They
yes.
can.
Yeah, and it starts with the leader, right? I mean, there's so many other factors in business. We have to have strategy and marketing. All these things count, but it all comes down to great leadership. And I believe in this current century, what was great leadership last century doesn't necessarily apply in this century.
Yeah, isn't that the case? There is no question that moving from the industrial era to now, finally, this digital era breaks out after so many years of technology developing, and people are now the most important tool before they were apart. So it is so
Yes,
different. And that's
yes.
why what you have to offer is really valuable. We see a new generation of millennial leaders trying to step up. And of
Hmm.
course, they're going to go through a lot of leadership learning.
They
And I
will.
think, you know, you say leadership is a journey and not a destination. What inspired you to help, leaders find the best leader within themselves?
So, honestly, Frank, it all started because I am a learning junkie and I was engaging in many random acts of learning over the
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
And just there's one book after the other, right? We've got servant leadership and authentic leadership and, transformational leadership, all these different kinds of leadership. And it's like, what do you follow? Like how do I figure out the leadership style that's right for me? But here's what really sealed the deal for me. So I was getting my master's and we're
Okay.
studying, charismatic leadership, all these different types. And there is not a single agreed upon definition of what leadership is.
Yeah.
There's lots of theories. But I mean, and you come from the IT world, project management, and it's like there's very clear definitions for many of these disciplines, but leadership does
No.
not have a definition. And I had a theory on that.
And what is the theory?
So, my theory is that while there's lots of fantastic definitions, a variety of them, there's not an agreed upon definition because leadership is as unique as the leader.
Yeah.
So, you being your best leadership self is going to be completely different than, the C-level guy down the hallway or girl down the hallway. Like people lead in different ways based on who they are. And to me, that's why there's not an agreed upon definition. But that doesn't mean we still don't need to understand and define what leadership means to us as
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've all worked for a lot of leaders, at least I have, over time.
Hmm.
And leaders are as different as people.
Yes,
They
because
are.
they are people.
Surprise, right?
Yes.
Another unique revelation. But, without a doubt, they're all different. And,
Yes.
some of them were very effective in different ways. They
Hmm.
had their own skills. Like I worked for one gentleman. I was running a call center at Merrill Lynch.
Hmm.
And the guy I worked for, I've never met anybody better with numbers. And I could give him like a report this thick of numbers. And we would have all gone through it. And he would literally do this. And he like circled something within 30 seconds. I mean, it was such a gift. I mean, the guy was
Yes.
incredible. He was very good at what he did, but he
Mhm.
had this incredible gift for leading by numbers. It was amazing.
Right.
I was
And
never going to be him, I can tell you that.
and the question is, how can you leverage that incredible superpower, whatever it is for you as a leader, and then fill in the blanks with, the team around you so that you really have a full and complete set of skills, but as a leader, you can't do it all.
Yeah. Oh, it's just yeah, people do have to find the best in them
Mhm.
and become their best selves, and that's why I thought this was just such an interesting, a concept because it resonated with me, and that's why I wanted you on the channel. I know you've been working on these rebel leader manifestos,
Yes.
and, they're really helpful guardrails for people who are going into leadership and beginning that journey, or even if they're deep into the journey, because it really makes them become introspective.
Mhm.
And I thought we could go through some of these guardrails that you came up with. And let's talk about them. And
Okay.
hopefully, our listeners can walk away with some things because they should be asking themselves these questions, right? Like,
Mhm.
what is my purpose? Is my purpose is my priority, right?
Mhm.
And, let's talk about that.
Okay. So the origin of this,
Mm.
because whenever I came up with the concept of the
Yeah,
Rebel Leader Field Guide, I didn't want people to think this is just, Jimmy Dean in a leather jacket on a motorcycle, but that in fact a rebel leader charts their own path. And so, as you said, the perfect description. These are guardrails
yeah.
or ways I think about rebel leaders and what they're about. So, as you said, my purpose is my priority, meaning if I understand what my purpose is, I live that out through my leadership and
Mhm,
make that a priority. And people who resonate with that, I feel really represent a rebel leader.
mhm. So, how about change starts with me? Why did you pick that?
Yeah.
How did you come upon that as one of these top things?
Well, I have over a decade of experience working in organizational transformation,
Yeah,
partnering with leaders and guiding them through, whether it be a system transformation or an organizational strategy transformation.
sure.
And every single time, what happens is we want other people to change, but we don't always take responsibility for changing ourselves, right? And so I really wanted to put it out there that as a leader, if you're not willing to make the change yourself, then how can you expect anyone else to change?
Yeah. Now, is there a way you've seen leaders maybe demonstrate this over time? Kind of leading by example, have because I agree with you. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that they should be driving change.
Yes, yes.
Right? And being the role models, and, I've
Hmm.
seen leaders who just welcome change and are always driving it, and I
Yes,
think they're highly effective because that sends a message, right? That it
it
is
does.
okay to change, and actually in this new world of work, it's expected.
Hmm. Right. So I'd love to address your question, but first, a caution for the leaders out there. So there is something I call the relay race of change. So you can all imagine, think to the Olympics or, watching your favorite track and field competition, and you have that runner and they're grabbing the baton and handing it back.
Yep.
Well, leaders who love change, and I have never experienced a leader who did not passionately embrace and love change,
Yeah.
can start grabbing so many change batons. They're passing them back in the organization and
Yeah.
they keep running on to the next and grabbing a baton and handing it back. And the organization ends up buried under all of the changes and really hits a point of saturation. So just a caution, it's
Yeah.
excellent to embrace change, but be careful you're not moving the organization into a level of change saturation.
It's so funny. We do assess the culture in a lot of companies, and
Yeah.
things you find is just demand management is not done well anywhere.
Mhm.
And so that is really important
Yes.
that people understand kind of the capacity for change
Mhm.
and think about what that might be because you're on the money. I mean, it's easy to task an organization with stuff.
Mhm.
Humans,
Yeah.
humans, they have simple minds, really, in the sense they can manage just a few variables, right?
Correct. Now, building on your question, where you asked about what a leader needs to do in terms of being the change or recognizing that the change starts with them,
Yeah,
I have a message that I've been sharing, and it's
sure.
It's be, do, say. the rebel leader way.
Oh,
And let me unpack that a little bit for you.
go for it.
Because what I find is many times leaders want to be like, yes, I champion the change, and they just talk about it.
Yeah,
Talking is great, but as we all say, talk is cheap. So
yeah,
that's where we want the actions to back it up. However, as you know from your work in culture, all behavior comes from belief, right?
yes.
So from an identity standpoint, so if you believe something, then that's what's going to cause and create your behavior. So that's where the leader in terms of change starts with me. I have to understand, how am I going to own the change, and how am I going to be differently so that I show up and do differently, right? I'm role modeling, and then that earns me the right to say, I can talk about it because I've actually demonstrated it.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of a famous quote, "Be the change you want to become." I forget who said that, but,
Yes. Gandhi. That was a quote from
Gandhi.
Gandhi. That's an excellent
Yeah,
one.
and it just always, it always stuck with me because I think
Uh-huh.
it's simple but true.
Yes.
You know, it really
Absolutely.
is. So, you know, the next thing, as I recall, was, you know, having the courage to be myself, be vulnerable, open to continuous improvement.
Yes.
You know, what could be in some ways more important in an era where continuous innovation is upon us for the winner?
Indeed. Indeed. And this ties back to the point that we made earlier in the conversation
Yeah.
about the leadership of today is not what it was of yesteryear. So, just to compare and contrast, leaders from the past needed to have all the answers, right?
Mhm.
They had it all figured out, and they would just come and explain to the people, here's what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. And this is where vulnerability is really important, because leaders don't have all the answers. They can't. There's
Yeah.
too much going on in the world around us to have it all figured out. We need
Yeah.
each other in an organization to make better decisions, to gather the right information. So that requires some courage. Right? I hear it repeatedly, especially on change projects where people want to have all the answers before they share anything.
Yeah.
And you know, you've done lots of
Oh,
transformations, Frank. How many times have you had all the answers in order to be able to tell everybody what's going on?
you know, I'll tell you, when we went in and looked at how many skills there were in a large IT division, you know, you're talking over 1,000,
Mhm.
which, you know, you can have, you know, one person who specializes in one piece of technology, and there's so many, and that could
Mhm.
be their career for X number of years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you better be willing to let go big time.
Mhm. Mhm. And
You
it's
know?
okay. And that's really what I want to assure leaders. It's okay not to have the answers.
Yeah.
You're going to create greater levels of buy-in and participation from your people by involving them in the conversation, not just presenting them with answers.
Yeah, and it's super hard, I think, for young leaders to be vulnerable.
Mm.
It's hard to, you
Mhm.
know, say, "Look, you know, I need your help,"
Mhm.
right? Because they don't
Yeah.
they don't wanna be appear weak,
Yes.
and but weakness is strength, isn't it?
It is. And here's another reality in just think about the career path, right? Generally people get promoted because they're experts. They're really fantastic at what they do.
Yeah.
And when you're an individual contributor, knowing the answer and being right is generally what you get rewarded for.
Yeah.
And it's a tough transition to go from I know all the answers and I figure it all out as the individual contributor into that role as a manager where, to your point, I don't have all the answers and I
Yeah.
need to be vulnerable.
And I think it's even more difficult in some ways for the people who are this expert, and then they get promoted to run that team, so,
Mhm.
you know, they could still rely in some ways on their expertise. They would be so much
Mhm.
better off learning to manage in a way where they weren't the expert, because then they could
Yes.
learn better skills and, you know, could hopefully move from managing, you know, to leading.
Yes. And so for your listeners who find themselves in that position, here's a quick tip.
Yep.
And that is pay attention to your ratio of telling versus asking. Because the more questions you ask and are eliciting information from others, the more you'll increase that kind of openness to others' input, and it will radically transform your leadership.
Boy, you know, there's a simple technique, right? They should actually track that, like you said,
Yes,
and very
yes.
few people do. They go
Hmm.
through life and they're reactive and
Hmm.
they're relying on whatever habits they built over time. So yes, they should step
Hmm.
back.
Yes. And so connecting back to the statement of being open to continuous improvement as a rebel leader, an opportunity for improvement is asking more questions.
Yes, for sure. I
Mhm.
think, yeah, I think that's great. And, I used to, even if I knew an answer, I'd say, what do we got to do here? I
Excellent.
would purposely just
Mhm.
not want to be the one who knew, right? And,
Mhm.
you'd be surprised. Everybody wants to help you immediately,
Yes.
right?
Yes. They
Everyone
do.
needs to be needed.
Mhm.
The basic human desire is to be needed. So suddenly you realize that as the less you know, the more people want to help. As
Yes,
certainly as long as you're doing your job, but, because there are things you gotta do too.
for sure.
And, that gets down to, I respect everyone's, the fact that they're a unique human being with a
Mhm.
life, heart, hopes, fears, and dreams, and
Mhm.
I love the humanity of that. You've probably come across great leaders who are just superhuman and, have
Mhm.
that endearing quality.
Mhm.
Where did you find that?
So for me, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book Integrity, where the author talks about the fact that it's a balance of results and relationships.
Uh-huh.
So if you think about the wake that occurs behind a boat that's going very quickly, it
Yeah,
requires balancing results and relationships. And we've all encountered those leaders who unfortunately were a little too results focused and not
you're right.
enough relationship focused. So that's why I put this in here. And the reality is we can no longer rely on leaders who lead from a position of man as machine, man and woman, but kind of like goes together, man as machine, right? Where we're just like doing what we're supposed to do because you're missing out on the brilliance inside of each human being. And
Yeah.
that to me is, that Peter Drucker quote about seeing that potential and really bringing that out in people is the job of a leader.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And in an era where people are the most important tool in every company,
Hmm.
what could be more important than these people building their humanity?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I guess as a rebel field guide directive, they should begin to track how
Hmm.
often they're really building relationships
Hmm.
versus, doing tasks and activities.
Yes, yes. And part of that gets into the definition. So, in the Rebel Leader Field Guide to Your Leadership Voice, there's actually a process that walks people through
Okay.
how to define leadership. And like we talked about earlier, because there's no agreed upon definition, it's my belief that by each individual leader reviewing and understanding what leadership means for them and actually coming up with a specific definition, they'll do exactly what you said, Frank. They'll
Yeah.
say, hey, relationships matter to me, and here's how I am going to pay attention to other people. So, like, what uniquely are you going to do versus the leader next to you?
Yeah. Listen, it's a journey, like you
It
said.
is.
It is a journey, and actually the journey continues. You always can get better and better, which is, I think, part of the excitement of finding that leader within you and consciously growing,
Yes.
right? Instead
Yes.
of accidentally growing. And
Hmm.
that's what you're asking leaders to do. And you're asking them also to be really good communicators, which I agree.
Hmm.
But tell us more.
So it's interesting, and I'm sure in your culture work you encounter this, that communication is one of those challenges that virtually every organization has, right?
Never.
All the surveys always come back, hey, we need better communication. But here's the funny part. Most leaders hear that, and what do they want to do? Send another email, have another town hall meeting, which is just pushing out more information, right? And the reality is, I talk about having complete communication, which means I'm not only sharing information with you, but I'm also asking for it back. So it goes in a circle, right? I share, then I listen. It goes back and forth. And so that's really the idea behind this item is I'm communicating completely, transparently, and making sure that I'm also listening, not just talking, because people don't need more leadership talking. They need a lot more leadership listening.
Yeah. So once again, they could begin to monitor the amount of one-way and two-way communication they're involved in.
Yes, yes.
Consciously, right? And actually spend over a course of a week, try to see what the mix is. Because maybe they're
Hmm.
being very directive and constantly blathering.
Yes, That could be.
Yeah,
And the other reality is
yeah,
many times it's tough to pay attention for yourself. So, another little tip here is you can actually recruit somebody that is
yeah,
around you and that you trust,
yeah.
who will help you pay attention to that ratio of telling versus asking
That's
and,
even better,
and
because
give you some feedback.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's sometimes very hard to track what you're
Hmm.
doing because you're so busy and you're so engaged in the moment. Boy, having somebody helping you kinda track and understand, how your mix of communication style, what it is, would be very
Uh-huh.
valuable. Very
Yes.
valuable, like a friend that's also a coach for you in the place.
Correct, correct, and just paying attention to your
Yeah,
communication. And I want to acknowledge for many leaders, it's always faster just to tell, right? Like, here's what I want you to do. Boom, boom, boom. But I always ask, especially for those who are parents, how effective is it when you tell your kids what to do? They always listen and do what you say, right?
yes.
Never.
Yeah.
So why is it that when we go into the workplace, we somehow think magically the people in the office are going to hear what we say and do exactly what we tell them? It just doesn't occur that way. So this is why asking and listening are so incredibly important.
Yeah, and I really love the idea of having a peer or friend mentor in the place who's
Mm-hmm.
actually tracking some of these things with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually
Yes,
you have to be very vulnerable to even ask someone to do that.
it is.
And,
Yes.
that alone would build an amazing relationship with that person because,
Mm-hmm.
of course, they'd wanna help you,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they work for you, right?
Yeah.
So wow, that could be incredibly powerful.
And let me build on that because, again, we're talking about the importance of asking more
Yeah.
questions, but it takes time, right? I just said how it's a lot faster just to say what you need and be directive, and that's true. So I want to remind leaders that they're in this for the long term. Because the more that you coach, ask questions, help people think on their own, the more you're developing other leaders. And that's where I want to challenge leaders in terms of what your definition is of leadership.
Mhm.
I have a belief that great leaders develop other leaders.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
and so if you're developing other leaders, that means asking them questions and letting them think and participate versus telling, telling, telling.
Yeah. Listen, that is couldn't be more important, and you should be developing the people around you because,
Mhm.
the number one thing, especially for millennials, they want is growth.
Yes.
They're looking for.
Mhm.
So they'll be just, really grateful and may even decide to put down roots and stay because you helped them grow and gave them pathways to do better and be better.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's fascinating. I don't know if you've paid attention to the leadership development research, but the idea of sitting in a class for 8 hours and magically learning has been proven less than effective
Over.
versus what you were just referencing. The idea of coaching is the fastest path to development. And it's really custom, right? It's paying attention to that individual and helping them grow where they need to.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing better than that type of observation and feedback, I think,
Hmm.
because there are a lot of, there are a lot of studies on leadership. I like that CCL 70-20-10, right? Which you may have seen, which is, 10% of it is real just learning.
Yeah.
20% is, based on new things that you're trying and doing and really working on the job. And 70% of it learn doing whatever you got to do.
Hmm.
And that's just, it really is the case. I mean,
Yeah.
people learn by doing
Yes.
and by being caught in the act doing something that they could improve and getting that feedback right there. So,
Hmm.
you know,
So you're absolutely right, Frank. Thumbs up. Yes, catch people, right? Don't wait 6 months or a year to the performance evaluation. And here's another tip for your viewers, and that is you get what you focus on.
yeah,
So many times leaders think, well, they're doing their job. So, why should I care? I'm just gonna point out when they're not doing what they're supposed to. And if you think about that, the more you point out what they're not doing right, what happens, right? It's like a downward spiral. So my encouragement to everybody is find people doing things right, recognize it, and you will be amazed because they'll do more and more of it.
yeah. And I tell you the truth, I love having people on the lookout for things that you could be doing better.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, what a great way to grow, to engage everybody. And
Hmm.
then you've built an open and honest culture because
Yes.
people will see you're authentic and you're vulnerable, and they'll begin to open up and be willing to grow and be vulnerable themselves, right?
Hmm. Yep. So continuously improve and catch people doing things that are correct and right, and you want to celebrate them for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those are fabulous tips. So, how about working to close the gaps between,
Hmm.
what I believe, what I say, and what I do, which is
Hmm.
another one of the rebel leader guardrails.
Hmm. Yeah, so this is unfortunately the reality that we say one thing and we do something different, right? It's just, I guess, maybe part of the human condition. But the reality is, leaders need to pay attention to that because the larger the gap, the more hypocritical they appear. And
Yeah,
they actually erode credibility and this is when I was talking earlier about be, do, say the rebel leader way. If
yeah,
you are telling everybody, hey, we're all in this together, and then you're going off with just the leadership team and ignoring input from everyone else, what you're doing doesn't line up with what you're saying, and
yeah,
it will completely diminish the impact of you sponsoring or supporting a change.
yeah. And quite honestly, it will have a lasting impact because
Yes.
no one knows who you are then. You can't trust
Yes.
the word.
Right. Right. So again, just like we talked earlier about having somebody pay attention to your ratio of asking versus telling, this could be another opportunity to get some observation about, how often do I say one thing and then actually behave in a contrary fashion? And I want to acknowledge for many leaders, they're not intentionally doing this. It's not like, well, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to come over here and do this. Like they're not purposefully making a gap. It's like a blind spot.
Yeah, I know. And it's, people somehow think they're clever and they're getting away with stuff. But the fact of the matter is, humans have this incredibly finely tuned sixth sense that's all
Mhm.
part of being human. And they pick up lack of authenticity, lack of
Yes.
integrity. This stuff, you can't get away with it.
Yes.
And as clever as people think they may be, everybody around them picks up on it pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So it's a killer, really. I think they've just got to suppress that, become self-aware enough, right, to know
Uh-huh.
they're doing it.
Yes. And to draw, so a lot of people talk about leadership is influence, right? They make that connection, and you will massively diminish your ability to influence others the larger that gap is between what your words and your actions are.
Yep. And these are big self-awareness issues, you
Yes.
find great leaders are very, very self-aware. So this whole concept of having people count and observe and knowing what your derailers are and, working on making sure people understand that, hey,
Mhm.
these are my derailers. I'd like help on these.
Yes.
And if you see me doing X, Y, and Z, just please, let me know.
Mhm.
Because
Super
you can change
powerful.
these things by, creating new habits that
Mhm.
overwrite your existing kind of reflexes.
Definitely.
And then, owning your impact on people and the planet. I like how you extended that out to beyond this little small view of just owning your impact on just a few people. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is much bigger than that.
Mhm. Yeah, and so for me, what that's about is you mentioned it earlier, Frank. You talked about the importance of taking responsibility,
Yeah.
right? And it's really easy today to be like, oh, that's not my problem. This isn't my problem. That's not my problem. And in reality, I believe that we're all in this together.
Yes, we are.
So what role am I playing? And just take responsibility for that. Acknowledge what you're doing and sort of take a moment to consider the extended impact of your actions, your words, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. So, those the Rebel Leader Field Guides, I like it because, they're really easy to consume. One
Hmm.
of my favorite books was always that 1 Minute Manager because
Yes.
it's so easy to read and
Hmm.
get through, and it was a good story. And when I got your Rebel Leader Field Guide, I had that same feeling, like, wow,
Hmm.
wow, anybody could get through this pretty quickly. They could take away nuggets, to
Hmm.
carry around. It's a nice size, and they could just try different things and just engage people to help them become a better version of themselves, right?
Yes. Would it be all right if I showed your viewers a copy?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Oh, please. I
Okay.
should have brought mine down. I usually
So
do. Yeah,
here's the your leadership voice. And one of the two key questions that we're looking to answer
yeah,
is, first of all, how do you define leadership? Because once you're clear on what leadership means to you, it enables you to then start evaluating yourself. So there was a CEO that I was working with, and he was having some really big challenges with his board,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and he recognized that, well, his concern was he didn't want to live out of integrity with himself, right? And he said in the past he was sort of reactive and made decisions that in retrospect were maybe not exactly what he would have wanted to do.
yeah.
So he took the time to follow through the process and came up with his definition of leadership.
Mhm.
And that served as a guide for him through some really, really difficult times with his board. And at the
I
end of that, he said it helped him live in integrity and make decisions that honored him and who he was in his leadership. And he said, even though it was hard, he said, I felt really proud of how I showed up.
yeah. And no doubt because he was being authentic, ended up with a
Yeah.
much better outcome, I would think,
Yes, yes.
right?
And this is the value of defining leadership for you, right? Because like servant leadership's great, authentic leadership, they're all fantastic, but what does that mean to you?
That's right. Very true.
Yeah.
And the whole notion of learning more about yourself and who you are, you have the 11 questions baked
Yes.
into the book.
Yes.
And that is something everybody should do. I don't know if there a place they can even find those?
They'll be up on therebelleader.com
Okay.
that people can go and access them.
Yeah, excellent. And, people should, use resources like this. They should get
Mhm.
a copy of the Rebel Leader Field Guide because it's easy and it's one of those things that I think will help everybody in some way because we all have things to work on. And
Mhm.
no matter how much progress we've made, there's still a better you out, right?
There is.
Really, really is.
Continuous improvement, Frank, continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement. And that's why we bring on great guests like you because, it gets people thinking. And the important lesson is self awareness, becoming the
Mhm.
best version of you. That means you need to get a lot of input.
Yes.
And people are afraid to find out who they are sometime. And it's terrible
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they're all, people are great.
Mhm.
And, there's greatness in everybody. There really is. In some,
Yes. And I love that you shared that, Frank, because bottom line, it's easy sometimes to compare yourself, right? Like you see another leader and you think, oh, wow, that's great. I could never be like they are. And diminish or dismiss the power that you have based on who you are and the way that you lead. So
yeah,
every leader has unique gifts and strengths. And to your point, find out what they are, self-awareness, and then celebrate them and use them for their full potential to become the best leader that you can possibly be.
that's right. Find out. Even if you find
Yes.
something super easy, it may be you're just very gifted at it and very, very good at it. And a lot of
Yes.
people struggle at things. So
Hmm.
those are all tools that people come uniquely equipped with and
Right.
all skills and aptitudes, and everybody's a little bit different. So, yes, they should use every tool that they have and they should find out what tools they're equipped with that are better than others.
Right, right. And so, in summary around that, it's like there's not one best leadership. One of my favorite illustrations, if you think of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs,
Yeah.
were they the same kind of leader?
Oh,
No, they were very different leaders,
yeah.
but yet they both successfully built enormous tech companies. And whether or not that's your goal as a leader, bottom line is they both were successful, so to say, but they were different in their styles. And I feel like they were fully who they were
I
in
uh,
creating their companies.
I think they're masters of being authentic. I really do.
Yeah.
And boy, they applied their unique styles. And
Hmm.
no one should try to be Steve Jobs. You're not going to succeed.
No,
It's just
no. And wearing a black turtleneck and jeans to work
right.
is not gonna make you Steve Jobs.
It is. It isn't. I mean, he had a lot of incredible, unique skills, drive, a very unique history.
Yes.
His whole childhood and the way he was brought up, and how
Mhm.
fearless he was about, even calling like Hewlett from Hewlett Packard when he was in 12th
Yeah.
grade because he was doing a project at school.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, the guy picked up the phone and was
Yeah.
amazed Steve called. So, he was always willing to really get out in front of things and
Mhm.
amazing guy. I love those stories of these people. I did get the book, the Steve Jobs book after he passed.
Mhm.
And God, I mean, what an amazing life.
Yes.
Really. And, some darker sides to him too, but that's life.
Mhm.
I mean,
That is.
everybody's got some fingerprint. It's unique. And I think the message here is find that unique fingerprint,
Mhm.
become the best leader you can possibly be, take feedback, get as much as you can. The greater your self-awareness, right, the further you're going to go, really, because
Yes.
you're going to become a better and better version of you. Well, Donna, where can people find your site? Brighton Leadership Group, right?
Yes, BrightonLeadership.com is where you'll find Brighton Leadership,
Mhm.
and the Rebel Leader has its very own website. So it's just therebelleader.com, and you'll be able to find more information on the book,
Yeah.
the questions that you mentioned, and a variety of other fantastic resources.
Very good. Do you have any parting thoughts for the folks here today?
Well, I just want to draw people's attention back to that quote, just kind of emphasizing and underscoring exactly what you said,
Yeah,
that it's better to be an amazing original than a poor copy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Fantastic.
Right? So be your original, amazing, beautiful self. The world needs more leaders who are authentic and truly themselves and help make all of our lives more magnificent versus more miserable.
That's right. Help build companies where the people and the company thrive together. Can
Yes.
be done. That should be everybody's aspiration. Donna, thank you so much for coming on and covering this incredibly important topic.
Thank you, Frank. It was a delight and best of luck to all the viewers in their leadership journey.
Yes. Thank you so much.